On April 9th, 1947, a strange and shocking headline appeared on the front page of the New York Daily News. Collier's body found in debris, crushed in own booby trap. The man who had been crushed was Langley Collier, a 61-year-old piano dealer and amateur inventor who lived with his brother Homer in their New York City brownstone at 2078 Fifth Avenue, New York City. Homer and Langley Collier inherited the brownstone from their mother upon her death in 1929, and over time, the eccentric brothers gained local notoriety and even some national fame. Homer began losing his eyesight in 1933, and as Langley took care of him, the pair retreated further and further into the privacy of their own home. Langley slowly cut ties with former friends and colleagues, and limited his time outdoors to late-night strolls. During these excursions, he would comb the streets of New York and gather any junk and roadside trash that struck his fancy, to take back home with him, to add to the steadily growing hoard which began with the tools and devices the brothers inherited from their father's former medical practice. The Colliers' reclusiveness inspired wild rumors around the neighborhood, rumors of hidden treasures and stashes of money. This made them a target for local spectators and teenage pranksters by day, and burglars and thieves by night, which only increased the brothers' paranoia. To keep the outside world out, Langley used his engineering skills to fashion a number of booby traps and tunnels through the piles of garbage in their crowded home. As the years passed, the two men fell behind on their bills. Then they stopped paying their taxes. The water was shut off and the telephone line was cut. Articles were written about them. Journalists tried to reach out to them. The city grew impatient with them. A man from the Consolidated Edison Energy Company even scaled their walls and tried to enter the home through an upper window to reclaim 2 gas meters. Despite many hostile encounters with the banks and police, the Colliers remained untouchable, largely due to the impenetrable labyrinth of trash they called home. But in late March of 1947, an anonymous tip was phoned into the police department, claiming that an awful smell was emanating from the Collier residence. It was the unmistakable stench of a rotting corpse. The first police officer on the scene was unable to enter the home, and it wasn't until more officers arrived and the crew began to dislodge the trash in the foyer and throw it out into the street that any headway was made. Later, an officer entered through a second-story window. After 5 long hours, the body of Homer was discovered in a small clearing, surrounded by boxes, books, and old newspapers, stacked from floor to ceiling. The coroner determined that he had died very recently of starvation, too recent to be the source of the smell that still lingered in the residence. So where was Langley? Police initially suspected that Langley had phoned in the tip and fled, but after an unsuccessful manhunt in New Jersey and 9 false sightings across the country, police decided to continue the search of the home and clean out some of the trash while they were at it. On April 8th, 18 days after the discovery of Homer's body, Langley's body, partially decomposed and eaten by rats, was found in a small, tunneled-out portion of the hoard just a few feet from where his brother died. The coroner determined that he had been deceased for a month, likely from asphyxiation due to a cave-in of the garbage above him. Langley was probably crawling through the tunnel to bring food to his brother when a booby trap was accidentally activated, killing him, and leaving his blind brother to die of starvation. All in all, over 100 tons of garbage were removed from the residence following the Colliers' deaths, including, but certainly not limited to, 25,000 books, 14 pianos, jars of pickled human organs, bricks and mortar from the crumbling walls and roof, a Ford Model T chassis, and 8 live cats. The city deemed the decaying home unsafe in June of 1947 and demolished it. Today, it's a pocket-sized park. The Atlas Obscura entry for the modern-day location calls it a Harlem park dedicated to compulsive hoarders killed by their own junk. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think about the Collyer Brothers every time I see a self-storage building. And believe me, I see a lot of them. And once you start to notice how many there are, you can't unsee them. As of right now, there are approximately 51,000 self-storage facilities in the United States alone, at least half of which have been built within 5 miles of my house. It seems like these eyesores are popping up everywhere. But why? How profitable are these things? Do we really need them? Do people really have that much stuff? And how exactly did we even get here? Since the dawn of mankind, there have been rental properties. From the tenant farming of Egypt to the plebeian renters within the city of Rome, all the way to the modern-day urban youth who served as the protagonists for the most insufferable musical in history, renting space to grow food, sleep, or simply live has been a mainstay in nearly every society. But renting for the sole purpose of long-term storage is a little more niche, and was, until very recently, a luxury of the upper class. But according to legend, the self-storage of personal items has its origins in ancient China. As the story goes, thousands of years ago, large clay pots were used by the Chinese to store items they could not or would not store in their homes. These clay pots were kept underground and were well guarded. The Romans also devised some kind of self-storage system, according to some sources, but much like the infamous bathroom sponge on a stick, the exact nature of their system remains the topic of heated debate. The British Empire was probably the first society to develop self-storage as we know it today. Those embarking on long sea voyages would often entrust banks with their personal effects until they returned home. Over time, the banks began to run out of space, and so a new solution became necessary. By the 1800s, banks were beginning to build warehouses for the express purpose of storing these overflowing items. Meanwhile, across the pond, Martin and John Beckens, the industrious sons of Dutch immigrants, were about to change the storage game forever. In 1891, they founded Beckens Van Lines, a small fleet of horse-drawn covered wagons which were used to move household items from place to place in the western United States. As the company expanded from Sioux City, Iowa, it helped facilitate migration to growing cities like Los Angeles. In order to enhance the entire moving process, and make an extra buck while they were at it, the Beckens brothers began construction of steel and concrete rental warehouses for use by new arrivals in Los Angeles as early as 1906. The success of these facilities in the western United States was due, in large part, to the fact that many homes in places like Texas and California were built without basements, where underused items tend to collect.
Aren't we going to see the basement?
Not many people have basements in California.
The Beckens Company continued to build a network of storage spaces across the nation in the following decades, but the next scientific advancement in self-storage technology didn't arrive until 1964, when the iconic roll-up garage doors made their first appearance in an Odessa, Texas facility called, wait for it, A1, you store it, you lock it, you carry the key. The seemingly out-of-place A1 at the beginning was an attempt by the owner to get the business listed at the very front of the phone book. Many of today's newer storage facilities are multi-story deals, entirely indoors, featuring climate-controlled environments, 24-hour video surveillance, keyless entry, and the convenience of automatic monthly draft payments, just like that gym membership you never use and that streaming service you never watch.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Now, in a sane world, you would think that the business of storing literal junk could never have grown to the size it has. But you'd be wrong, because we live in a clown world, and I have the numbers to prove it.
Hot diggity dog! This place is magnificent.
Apparently, 5x5s and 10x10s are making a lot of money. Worldwide, the self-storage industry is worth approximately $58 billion and is expected to top $72 billion by 2028. To give you an idea of the scale, here's the American self-storage industry's annual profits compared to McDonald's, and the entire box office revenue of both the US and Canada for 2022. Yes, I made this crappy graph myself. I'm no investment expert, but with charts like this, I'd say those silly-looking roll-up doors are making a whole lot more money than your crypto portfolio.
No one knows what it's like.
Now, I get that we're not exactly comparing apples to apples here. McDonald's is just one company, and to make a truly fair comparison, we'd have to compare the storage industry to the entire American fast food industry, whose revenue is about $280 billion annually. Obviously, storage is not America's biggest industry by any stretch of the imagination, but the main reason I bring up Mickey D's is to compare the number of locations. It may seem like McDonald's restaurants are everywhere in America, and they really are, considering that they've got 13,000 locations nationwide. But that's nothing compared to our 50,000 self-storage facilities.
We're not here just to take part, we're here to take over!
Here are America's top storage businesses according to Self Storage Almanac and recent earnings data. As you can see, public storage and extra storage rank highest on both lists, surpassing their competition in revenue and number of locations by significant margins. The average monthly cost of a storage unit has recently reached the $100 mark, after increasing sharply in 2020 and 2021 for no apparent reason at all. And if we look at the cost breakdown by size, we can see that the bulk of the profit is being generated by smaller sized units like the 5x5s and 5x10s. Although they take up less space in a facility, these units are in higher demand, which leads to higher prices per square foot. Now let's look at the construction spending over the last 10 years. In 2013, the self-storage industry's monthly construction expenditures topped $50 million, or $64 million in 2023 money. By 2018, that number was regularly breaking the $350 million mark, $415 million in today's money. And aside from a noticeable dip in 2020 and 2021, again, for no apparent reason, the market seems to have recovered, and at many points on this graph, monthly construction spending has topped out at an astounding $450 million. The YouTube channel Modern MBA made a great video on the rise of the self-storage industry, which makes the case that these 5 factors contribute to its continued growth. The video also points out that a sharp increase in home prices, as well as inflation and wage stagnation in recent years, have kept more Americans out of homes that could hold all of their stuff, forcing them to store their belongings in rental spaces. All of this growth makes perfect financial sense when you really think about it. There's high demand for non-livable rental space, there's millions of square miles of land in America on which to build, there's a relatively wealthy customer base, the construction of simple, cookie-cutter storage facilities is easier and cheaper than building houses or apartments. The business model allows for minimal upkeep and minimal staff, and unlike most residential properties, local zoning regulations usually allow storage facilities to be built taller, resembling the notoriously ugly 5/1 apartment design style currently taking over America.
This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
With tens of thousands of locations, employing 170,000 workers, offering 2 billion square feet of rentable area, that's 6 square feet per person, our capacity to stash golf clubs, snow skis, and suction-powered breast augmentation devices is unmatched on the world stage.
Damn. Hey Steve, you got any idea what these things are?
And the reason why we keep feeding this beast is because the average American is complacent and addicted to the dopamine hits generated from buying stuff. The psychology behind self-storage is very straightforward. People tend to get attached to material things, and in our material world, it's easy to accumulate a lot of said things. So rather than get rid of them, you decide to store them. I'll use them again someday, you tell yourself. But as Morgan Freeman once said, that shit was a lie and you know it. You spend a Saturday rounding up the excess stuff, find a place to keep it, and sign up for automatic payments. Simple, easy, convenient, all by design. Time goes by and you think less and less about all that stuff you've put away, and the payments keep drafting. Then one day, you realize that rates have gone up, but it's not much. You can afford it. Sometime later, your finances change, and you start thinking that maybe you should cut that $100 a month bill out of your life. That sounds nice, but think of all the time and energy it would take to clean the unit out, or move it to a cheaper location. And even if you quit cold turkey, you'll still have to spend time sorting through the stuff to decide what to get rid of. In the end, you can't muster up the force necessary to clean it out. Newton's first law of motion wins, and the storage guys keep collecting a check. To top it all off, even if you go for the nuclear option, abandon your belongings, close your bank account, and let the storage facility deal with it, they'll just auction off all your stuff to clear room for the next paying customer. 150,000 of these auctions happen every single year, which adds up to about $60 million in additional annual profits. Human psychology wouldn't be so easy to manipulate if we didn't have so much stuff in the first place. Here are some points to consider. Directly following World War II, the average new single-family home in America was a little less than 1,000 square feet. 70 years later, that average is closer to 2,500 square feet. Attached two-car garages also became much more common during this time. That's a lot of extra room to store a lot of extra stuff. There are an average of 300,000 individual items in every American home. Modern American women own 30 outfits on average, compared to just 9 outfits 100 years ago. 1/4 of people with a 2-car garage can't even park 1 car inside. Americans spend as much on shoes, watches, and jewelry as they do on higher education, and 30% of Americans buy Christmas presents for their pets. Polls by GE Money revealed that women will spend nearly 3 years in total shopping. This includes groceries, back to school, beauty products, clothing, and more. Economic freedom, while great in so many respects, has its downsides, as all things do. And one of the worst downsides of capitalism is that it can quickly snowball into pure consumerism.
If I saw something clever, like a little coffee table in the shape of a yin-yang, I had to have it.
In this consumerist system, All other values, be they cultural, religious, or social, take a backseat to the consumption of products. In the West in general, but specifically in America, our unbelievable wealth has given us the opportunity to accumulate more stuff than any other nation at any other time in history, and the melting pot of American culture has sadly eroded the Christian emphasis on living a simple, modest life. In essence, consumption is easy, it's cheap, it gives us that coveted dopamine hit. It creates a vicious cycle of keeping up with the Joneses, and the cultural institutions and social structures which would normally stop us from engaging in such gluttonous behavior are not as strong as they once were. This has led us to fill our homes with so much clutter that we can't even fit it all in one location, and we feel compelled to store much of it somewhere else. All this stuff is a problem. It's expensive, it's hard to keep track of, it's wasteful, and most of all, it's a distraction from the more important things in life. What we need is a plan to get us on the right track. We need someone to show us the way. We need Marie Kondo.
We're gonna hang out.
We're going to watch Tidying Up with Marie Kondo.
I'll pay you.
Marie Kondo is a Japanese author, businesswoman, organization expert, and the host of two popular Netflix shows, Tidying Up with Marie Kondo and Sparking Joy with Marie Kondo. Tidying Up took America by storm in 2019 and even led to an increase in charity donations in the months following the show's premiere. For some reason, Americans were really inspired by the idea of letting a cute little Asian woman into their home to throw out their stuff. We really will watch anything, won't we?
Yes, popcorn, yes, popcorn.
Her method of organization is known as the KonMari method, which she developed in college. In fact, her senior thesis as a sociology student at Tokyo Women's Christian University was titled Tidying Up as Seen from the Perspective of Gender. But Kondo's obsession with organization goes back even farther, to her childhood. Here's how she described a defining moment in her cleaning career. I was obsessed with what I could throw away. One day, I had a kind of nervous breakdown and fainted. I was unconscious for 2 hours. When I came to, I heard a mysterious voice, like some god of tidying, telling me to look at my things more closely. And I realized my mistake. I was only looking for the things to throw out. What I should be doing is finding the things I want to keep, identifying the things that make you happy. That is the work of tidying. Personally, I like to think that her tidying technique is divinely inspired. So let's go over how it works. Start by dividing your belongings into separate categories like clothing, paper, kitchen, bathroom, garage, books, and sentimental items. Then sort through them one by one to determine which items spark joy and which do not. Items that do not spark joy should be immediately thrown out, but ones that do should be given a special place in the home, where they will remain until needed. There's a reason why Kondo's show became so popular for a while. The method makes sense, and there's never been a greater need for it. I think a lot of Westerners realize that they've got too much stuff, and deep down, they prefer a simplified life. But in a lot of cases, other obligations take up our time, or we get distracted, or complacent. That's no excuse though, because if we can take the time to collect the stuff, we can take the time to part ways with it. What I like best about Marie Kondo is that she focuses on the positives. Possessions are good. They're necessary for human life. We need tools and clothing and shelter to survive. We may think we need the rest of it, the stuff that doesn't spark joy, but in the grand scheme of things, we really don't. Realizing this is the first step in tidying up our homes and ultimately our lives. But there are some people who even Marie Kondo can't help.
I hate this place, this zoo, this prison.
Hoarders is an American reality television series which premiered on A&E Network in 2009 and was followed by TLC's Hoarding Buried Alive 1 year later. Over the course of 13 seasons, the original show documented the interventions by family members, psychologists, and professional cleaning crews aimed at helping hoarders clean up their homes and, in a few episodes, their overflowing storage units. It's equal parts tragic, disgusting, and fascinating, in the same vein as the story of the Collyer Brothers. Hoarding disorder, or compulsive hoarding disorder, affects an estimated 2.6% of Americans to some degree or another. Symptoms can be as severe as those depicted on the TV series, but they can also be more mild. Hoarding is characterized by an inability or unwillingness to part with possessions, no matter how little value they may have, distress or anxiety at the thought of discarding items, shrinking of living space in the home due to the accumulation of items, extreme indecisiveness and or procrastination, sensitivity or defensiveness when attention is directed toward congested areas or when others attempt to clean, Prior to the release of the 5th edition of the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders in 2013, hoarding was categorized alongside obsessive-compulsive disorder, but DSM-5 classified hoarding separately, likely because it has also been linked to other ailments such as major depressive disorder and not strictly OCD. As for what causes hoarding in the first place, there probably isn't one singular reason. Genetic predispositions, early childhood trauma, family tragedies, a relationship to someone else who hoards, or information processing deficits within the brain may all play a role in this behavior. Hoarding has definitely become a lot easier and more widespread in the age of excess. Prior to the modern era, mental disorders in the general population would have manifested in different ways, since most people were too poor and owned too few possessions to hoard. The wealthy and the upper class, however, could have, and it's easy for us to imagine that at least some figures in the ancient past accumulated more than just riches, for reasons other than greed or pride. And when we consider that the 4th circle of hell in Dante Alighieri's Inferno serves as the final resting place for those who loved material things above all else, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to conclude that hoarding, as a compulsive behavior, may be more than just a modern malady. The tragedy of the Collyer Brothers and the horrifying stories documented on Hoarders should serve as cautionary tales. The pressures of life can affect people in very strange ways, and in our current age of excess, it may be prudent to make cleanliness and domestic simplicity a habit. Otherwise, your collection of stuff could very well grow to surround you, suffocate you, and entomb your lifeless corpse for all eternity, like the vessels and trinkets which surrounded the pharaohs of Egypt. Stranger things have happened. If I haven't scared you into cleaning out your storage unit yet, don't worry, I've got one more trick up my sleeve. Believe it or not, storage units aren't just used for stashing unused belongings. Sometimes they're even used for murder.
What if we rented one of those self-storage places? You know, those little orange garages worked out of there.
For the second time in just a week, St. Paul police have found a missing woman dead and dismembered in a storage unit.
And the body found in the McQuan storage locker are that of former police chief Rick Young.
The man who police say was last seen with that woman is already jailed for the murder of another woman.
His body was found last October after complaints of a suspicious smell.
Arlington police are investigating a man's body found at this storage facility.
A murder victim's body being found inside a storage unit and a suspect in custody.
Thankfully, cases like this are extremely rare, extremely rare,
extremely rare.
Investigators say the family had stored her body there for more than a decade.
They found a dozen bodies and the cremated remains of more than 40 people in self-storage units.
Police say they served a search warrant here at the storage facility. They say they found human remains in one of the units.
The body of 68-year-old Mary Kay Wolfarth found inside the storage unit across from hers.
She said, "You can't sell my stuff at auction. My grandmother is in that storage unit."
It was a missing persons investigation that led investigators to this storage facility here behind me.
The 5-year-old girl's body was found inside a storage unit here at this U-Haul facility.
Extremely rare, extremely rare.
They found the bodies of the 2 missing men inside storage bins.
And if you take a look right behind me, right here inside of one of these units is where they say that they found that woman dead.
You know what? I thought about diving into a few specific cases here. I really was going to go for a Dateline feel. There's just too many to choose from, too many cases. And honestly, I think the montage really did the trick. People love stashing bodies in storage units. Enough said.
It's done. Yes, Mr. Frodo. It's over now.
Our obsession with stuff is a problem. There's no denying that. So what are we going to do about it? What should we do? Well, a few things. First, we can all take a little time to declutter. Just a few minutes a day will make a big difference. And if you already store things off-site, make an effort to get rid of that extra junk, or at least bring it back home and make room for it there. Wouldn't you rather save that money for something or someone that really matters to you, instead of giving it to a mega corporation that builds these hideous, soulless abominations? Second, stop worrying about what other people have. I know, very ironic considering the topic of this video. But seriously, it's not a competition. You don't need the coolest, newest thing in order to seem relevant. Materialism is the enemy of inner peace, because there's always some new, shiny thing to tempt you and make you feel unfulfilled for not having it. Third, we need to target these self-storage facilities with homemade explosives with a sustained boycott campaign. Once the money starts to dry up, they'll convert them into miniature pod hotels like they have in Japan. But that's a topic for another video. Lastly, try doing some dopamine fasting and see how long you can go without buying frivolous things. Then see how long you can go without buying anything at all. How long do you think you can make it? Challenge yourself. You may be surprised how well you do. I'll leave you with a little wisdom from one of my favorite historical figures, the ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes of Sinope. Diogenes was basically homeless for most of his life, opting to live in large vessels like clay pots and wooden barrels found along the city streets, rather than an actual home. He spent much of his time with stray dogs. He relieved himself wherever he pleased. He wore nothing but a robe, and his only property was a wooden bowl. He was a man who believed in living a simple life in accordance with nature, and boy did he walk the walk. One day, while taking a stroll near a creek, he witnessed a peasant boy drinking water with his hands cupped. Realizing the error of his ways, Diogenes cast his wooden bowl aside and said, "A child has beaten me in plainness of living. Fool that I am, to have been carrying superfluous baggage all this time."